have mic runners, yeah.
Okay, we can do that. Okay, we'll do that.
It was slide 6. Where is mine? Haven't seen where you.
Yeah, it's just a lot of mic. This mic goes in the pocket.
Right.
This unclips.
To this. You've met Jasmine before, right?
It'll stay hidden.
To his collar. Okay.
If that light is green, off at one time, it'll go to red. So did I hear him say he wanted to have a Q&A during his program?
He may.
Okay.
So which means we would need those
Yeah,
mics.
I'm just gonna put them back there, and they'll be available whenever you want to ask somebody a question. There you go. So you have a couple of people to pass them around.
You're gonna have people pass around.
Yeah,
So,
we have the same two that we're doing the sign-in. Are gonna be your microphone.
okay, so I might ask some questions during my presentation, so they'll run around. And
This young lady, get a mic.
oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
They'll turn green. When they're green, they work. When they're red, they don't.
It's heavy.
Yeah, that's sounds good. Okay, that's perfect actually. Okay, so it is on.
Okay, hello. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Mr. B.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I see the green dot. One, two, three.
Yeah, turn it up the other way.
Do we need to put it on the other side?
Let's do that.
Let's move it.
I'll put it on your shirt, actually. On his side.
Well, 1,
still
2,
put it
3,
on.
4, 5, 6.
I can switch.
One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Is that good? Get the student out here. No, I'm too long about it. Yeah. Students are not allowed in here yet. How are you, sir?
Good. How are you?
Very good.
No, I was checking Instagram to see if you made the play.
Oh, yeah,
I'm
you
good.
were.
How are you? I was like,
It was a lot.
yeah.
That would be great. Just say, Yeah, thank you. And any tissue? Hey, how are you?
You remember me?
Yes, yes, yes. How you doing?
All right. I brought you some pictures.
Okay,
here.
okay, let me see. Hold
You
on,
want me
hold
to
on.
sleep them up there?
Yeah, yeah. What did
I got you. Well, I sure hate that about Frederick.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. How your mother?
She's good. She's good. No, she's not here.
Hey, yo.
Oh, there I go.
You want me to just leave them up
Yeah,
there?
yeah. It does. Cherie will probably hold them for me. Wait, you know what? She put my bag back here. I put it with my bag.
Okay. Hey, John.
Yes.
Good to see you, man.
You too, sir. You can. Hello, hello, hello.
Awesome. Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Grambling State University. It's a beautiful day on our campus. Welcome to the place where everybody is somebody. Many of you have joined us today for this special conversation. Some of you are on spring break, and you're an alum coming here to hear this awesome conversation. Current students, our faculty, and our staff. Growing up Grambling, I would often dream about the broader world. And when I think about the leadership moment here in our country and at our institution, we now get to bring the world to Grambling. And so we're excited for today's conversation. We're ready to get started. And to introduce our wonderful speaker, I'd like to bring up Kiana.
Good morning, everybody. How are you guys doing? I'm Kiani Moore, and I'll have the honor of introducing our guest speaker for today. Mr. Charles M. Blow is an author, journalist, cultural critic, and political commentator. Mr. Blow has a long-time op-ed columnist at the New York Times, and he has been named Harvard University's inaugural Langston Hughes Fellow. He has been a political analyst on MSNBC, a contributor on CNN, and The Anger of Crime with Charles Blow on the Black News Channel. Mr. Blow hosts Ideas at Ford with Charles Blow, a lecture series at the Ford Foundation, and he is a consultant for the MacArthur Foundation and Press Forward, a $500 million philanthropic effort to help maintain and restore local news. He is also a contributor to the Encyclopedia Britannica. Mr. Blow is the author of New York Times best-selling books, Fire Shut Up in My Bones and The Devil You Know. Fire Shut Up in My Bones was developed into an opera that was performed at the Metropolitan Opera, the first opera by a Black composer in the history of that institution. That's a big deal, y'all. The Devil You Know was developed into a feature-length documentary for HBO. In 2016, Mr. Blow was a presidential visiting professor at Yale, where he taught a seminar on media and politics, tracking the presidential race in real time. Mr. Blow served as the art director of National Geographic magazine in 2006, and before working with the Times, he worked at the Detroit News. Mr. Blow graduated magna cum laude from Grambling State University in Louisiana, where he received a Bachelor of Arts in Mass Communications, and he holds honorary doctorates from Massachusetts College of Art and Design in Boston and the Metropolitan College of New York. He lives in Atlanta and has 3 adult children. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming our guest for this afternoon, Mr. Charles M. Blow.
Thank you so much. Hello, how are you? Great. So first order of business, everybody on the first 4 rows, come down. This is a class, this is not a lecture. You're participating in this class. I want everybody on the first 4 rows, everybody in the back, please come down to the first 4 rows of the auditorium, please. Thank you. Yes, the guy who was just counting the rows, you're not on the first 4 rows. You can come on down. I know I saw somebody with some crutches, I'm so sorry, but if you could also come down, that would be great. And if you sit on the front row, it's not church. I'm not going to baptize you. You'll be all right. I see some students on the left. They're like, you're not going to tell me to sit on the first 4 row. I sit where I want to sit. All right. So we're going to start with examining the role of a columnist and a writer. I have 2 of these classes, so in the next class we're going to go much more deeply into voice, but we're going to reach voice today in this particular class, but we're going to get there by examining what it means to be a columnist, how you get to be a columnist, what is the role of a columnist and a writer in society. So I'm going to start with discussing how I became a columnist. So I was a mass comm major here at Grambling. Did not want to be a mass comm major. I had met the governor of Louisiana, who at that point was Edwin Edwards, very colorful, crazy character who went to jail eventually, got out, tried to run again. And I just saw like, this guy is ridiculous and crazy and having a ball, and I want to be him. So I wanted to be a lawyer, and I came to Grambling and I majored in English and pre-law, because back then I had read some book that said that most of what you would do as a lawyer was argumentation. It would writing, not in front of a judge or a jury. So it was better to major in English so you'd be a stronger writer. Majored in English, mass comm. I had a English class that was in a big room like this, but it was in Woodson Hall. And I sat in the back, chit-chattering, gossiping, and playing, talking to my friends. And I have no idea how this man did this, but he would give us writing assignments and he would grade them in a room this big. So I don't know how he was doing all this. He gave us one writing assignment, and it was a creative writing assignment. Write a scene from your life, something really important to you that happened to you that's interesting. I, like the students that I knew, I'm not gonna put it on you students, but students that I knew waited to the very last minute to do this assignment. It is now the night before the assignment, and I am scrambling. We did not have, for whatever this thing y'all have is, 5-hour energy drink, we didn't have any of that. We had no-dose, which should probably be illegal by now because it was an overdose of caffeine. It was like a caffeine pill. And I had figured out by that point that Dr. Pepper had the most caffeine of all the sodas. So I had Dr. Peppers, I had no-dose, and I had these little coconut-covered donut thingies. I don't know what they're called for real. And I'm doing this all night long, and I'm banging away. There is no computer. We had typewriters. So I have typewriter and whiteout. So if I catch an error, I white it out and fix it. But it's the middle of the night. I'm blurry-eyed. I'm this high on caffeine. I have no idea what I'm typing. The sun is coming up. I rip the sheets out of the thing, out of the typewriter, and run across campus just to make it to class on time. Turn this thing in, just hoping that I do not fail. I have no idea what's on these pages. A couple of weeks later, I'm chit-chatting in the back. He's passing out papers. He's graded them, however he's doing this magic. And he says, there's one that I'm interested in, I want to read to you. And I'm still talking, and I realize he starts to read my essay. And he's very impressed with it, whatever. He calls my name, he says, meet me after class. I meet him after class. He says, no, he sits me down. What do you want to do with your life? I don't remember who this professor was, but clearly you guys were not treating him well. He did not like his job. And he says, what are you going to do? Are you going to be a teacher if you don't go to law school? And I said, no. He says, you don't want to be a teacher if you don't go to law school. He says, so major in mass comm and pre-law. At least that way, if you don't go to law school, you'll have a profession. Go over to law school, or go over to the J school, mass comm department, and major in, not major. We had to pick a concentration. The concentration I picked, because it was easy, not because it's the right choice, it's easy, was visual communications, because I'm going to law school anyway. I don't know why I'm over here. And I can do this one, and I can go to all the parties and keep my scholarship, and it'll be perfect. So I do this, and then I eventually decide that I'm not going to law school, and then I completely panic, because what do you mean? I have a degree in visual communication. Like, what is that? That's not a thing. So I panic, and I eventually just say, okay, pull it together. This is your life. This is your major. Be the best at it that anybody has ever been at it. And that's literally what I told myself. And I went out into the world trying to be the absolute best at it that anybody could ever be at it. And doing that got me back to the New York Times. I had interned there, back to the New York Times as a graphics editor. And 1 year after that, and I'm 25 years old, they asked me to be the graphics director, which made me the youngest department head in the history of the New York Times. There was one guy in the 40s who was the Paris bureau chief, but he only had one employee who was his assistant, so we did not count him. So I was the youngest department head. And I loved the work that I did. I felt I was really good at it. And I did it for a while, then they made me the deputy design director for news. And I was kind of like feeling like I'd done it all in that space, but I didn't know what else to do. And I would always say, and I don't know why I would say this, but I would say, I know why I would say it. I would say the only way I would leave the Times was go to National Geographic, because I was doing visual communications, and National Geographic was the pinnacle of that. They were they produced the atlases. They didn't just make maps in newspapers. They produced the atlases. And they produced kind of scientific illustration. They consider themselves to be quasi-scientific journals. They don't have the panel of experts, the peer review, but they do it themselves. They hire experts onto staff in order to do the work. And I had talked to the art director one time before. It was because I developed this thing at the Times I called Design U. I had a universal theory of design, that all design was connected one to the other. So if we were doing graphic design, that was connected to architecture. That was connected to product design. That was connected to artistic endeavors. And so I would have field trips. We'd go out. We went to Madame Tussauds to see how they do what they do. How do you recreate a person? We went to the Metropolitan Museum. How do you curate a show to make sure that people go in the way that makes them appreciate the art better? I called him to see if we could talk to them. It didn't work out, but I talked to him one time, not about a job or anything. This guy calls me at my desk one day. It is 2006, and he says just these sentences. Hello, how are you? Good. This is whomever. He says, I'm leaving my job. There's one person I want to have it. It is you. Do you want it? Yes. So within 2 weeks, I go to the interview. I have accepted this job in a couple of weeks. But I told them, like, I was a single dad at the time, but my ex and I had kind of a robust visitation schedule. So they went to her house every Thursday, every other weekend. We alternated all holidays, and we split the summer down the middle. So there was a lot of interaction there, and they were in school. And so by that time, my ex had moved away to Chicago to take a job. So I figured, okay, I'm not as attached to New York because the visitation schedule doesn't work anymore. But they have to finish the school year. So I told them, I said, I can't start right now. The kid thing is a thing. And they said, we need you right now. We will fly you to work every morning and fly you home at night. This job is in DC. I live in Brooklyn. So I said, can't turn that down. So I start this thing. Insanity, insanity. It is plane, trains, and automobiles every single day. I drove to the airport, caught the flight, got to DC, took the train into work. At the end of the day, did the whole thing over again. This is 4+ hours every day, one way. I like the job. Nat Geo is an amazing place, and the basement is like, first of all, my office was like half as long as this stage. Today, like, this is old school money. Like, this is old, like, and I was like, so how do I furnish it? It's like, furnish it. And I was like, I could just buy anything? They were like, so, I'm like, I have expensive taste. And then they said, you could decorate it. And I said, with what? And they said, in the basement. And it's like Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's like everything that they've ever sent anybody on an expedition to find, to make, to paint. So back in the day when they used to paint things, they would paint on a canvas this big. They just shoot it down and put it in the magazine. So I'm in this, I'm like any of this. So I have the most amazing art, and I'm like pulled up from there. So it's an amazing job, but I'm going insane because I'm never home, and I have 3 kids. So I have 3 nannies at that point, 1 in the morning to get them off to school, because I leave long before they do, 1 in the afternoon to get them home, and then 1 in case the trains don't work, the flight doesn't work, I have to sleep in an airport, which has happened. So this was not sustainable at all. And as soon as I took the job, my ex-wife moved back to New York. So now we really have a problem, because that's the way the law works. The jurisdiction in which the divorce was granted, that's still the jurisdiction, and if both parents are the jurisdiction, one can't take the children away from that jurisdiction. So now I'm like stuck. And the judge is not moving fast on this, trying to resolve what we should do. And the executive editor at the New York Times will see me from time to time. I think he was stalking me, and he was this is crazy, what are you doing? You gotta come back to the Times. And I'm like, ha ha ha, no, I'm fine. And then I took all of December off the last year I was at Nat Geo. I was only there almost 2 years, not a full 2 years. And it was only then that I realized how tired I was, because I could not move. I would get the kids off to school in the morning, and I would just crash. I would come back in the house, and I would sleep all day. And I was like, it just caught up. And I realized, like, this is not healthy. Also, if you see, I have, all this is gray on me. Like, it's like white. Nobody in my family grayed like that. That is all the stress of all that travel. Like, it's white. And so I called my boss at Nat Geo at the end of that December, and I said, you know I'm not coming back to work, right? He was like, I know. And I quit. And I called Bill Keller and said, hey, let's have lunch. We had lunch. He says, you should come back. I said, great. He says, what do you want to do? I had no idea, because my job was filled. But here's just a bit of advice to students in the room. If you are going to create a job, you have to create a solution. Nobody's just going to create a new job and add to their budget to accommodate you, no matter how fabulous you are. They will, if you solve a problem that saves them money, they will absolutely consider you and the proposal you're making. So when I was at the Times, I knew that the editorial page, which was separate from my department, was doing this thing called op charts. They were creating charts for the op-ed page, and I knew that those were all freelance. So they had a freelance budget of money that they were paying each time for these people to do this work, probably overpaying them a little bit because they weren't on staff. I just said, hey, make that money into a salary. I become your chart person on staff. I'm expert at doing this, and you'll have an in-house op chartist. No extra money, solve your problem, solve my problem, great. They jumped up and down. Everybody's happy, everybody's thrilled with this idea. Go in to talk to Andy Rosenthal, who is the opinion editor at the time, and he says, this is not really an interview, because I've known Andy forever, and he says, oh, everybody loves this idea, so what are we going to call you? And I was like, op chartist. That made sense to me. He's like, oh, it's too complicated. We're just going to call you a columnist. I'm like, what? And then he says, so you're going to write something to introduce this chart you're going to make? And I said, I guess. And he says, like 400 words? And I said, I guess, because I have no idea at that point what 400 words is. I have not written since I was at the Grambling night on this campus. And he says, yes, and he took the phone call, and he kind of shoos me out of the room, like, we're done. And I go downstairs in the building, out of the door, and I literally have to brace my back against the wall, because I'm like, what do you mean you just made me a columnist at the New York Times? I have no writing experience. How am I possibly going to do this? This makes no sense. I have gone from this is what I used to do. I created these illustrations. I explained things visually. I was not a writer. This was my talent. And I realized right away that I didn't really even know what it meant to be a columnist. I had read columns, but there was no handbook. There was no, this is not a job journalism in general is not a job that requires a certification. So there are no fixed set of rules that everyone has to master, and therefore you take a test and they certify you as capable of doing this work. There is no certification, so the definitions are all over the place about what it is, how you do it, what are the ethics involved in it, the whole thing. I want to play for you this video. These are two columnists who are discussing what it means to be a columnist.
My name is John Ibbotson, and I'm writer-at-large for the Globe and Mail.
I'm Vicky Mochama. I'm a writer, columnist, and editor here in Canada. A columnist is someone who gets to share their point of view on the news from the point of view of journalism. In journalism, there's often two roles that are kind of, filling the newspaper. One is the reporters, and they go out and they report the facts, they find out what has happened, and they verify its truth. What a columnist does is effectively the same, but they get to add their opinion and their point of view on it.
So a columnist offers their perspective on the events of the day based on their experience in reporting. A column has to be a lot more than just an opinion. It has to provide history. It has to explain how the issue of the day is relevant to the society and to the political culture that we live in. I love being a columnist. It allows me to explain the why of a situation as well as the who, the what, the where, and the when.
I love doing that work because I think it's really interesting to go out and test my assumptions about what I think is true, what I think is real, what I think is really impacting people. And as a columnist, share my thinking and my thought process around that and tell people, what's really urgent to me or to my community.
The real challenge is to offer insight rather than just opinion. All journalism is grounded in reporting, reading things, talking to people, going to places, looking at what's going on the ground. A columnist has to do that every bit as much as a reporter. That is, after all, the essence of journalism.
I find it really challenging sometimes because some of the things you're asking people about, maybe they've never thought about before. Not every politician's maybe, spent their career thinking about racial justice issues, and you're often asking them to have a brand new conversation. But that challenge is also what makes it really exciting for me because I think you're getting really honest answers from people where they're really starting to think about stuff. And so it means you've created a conversation. And as columnists, our job is essentially to do the work of creating conversations, of spurring the public into some kind of new imagination about maybe something they hadn't thought about before.
So even in that video, the two columnists are not agreeing on what the role of the columnist is. John specifically believes that you have to bring history and that sort of perspective to the column. He's also saying that you have to go out and do on-the-ground reporting in the same way that a person who is a reporter would do. That is not a universally accepted concept of what a columnist is. There are a lot of people who just sit behind a desk or in bed, and they read a lot, they consume a lot, they read other people's reporting, they may even call that reporter, or they may even call a professor, but they're not doing as much on-the-ground reporting as another columnist might do. I think the simple definition of what a columnist is that a columnist is a journalist who includes opinion and perspective. But that can be a whole lot of things. One thing that John says in that video is that it allows me that should be explained, explain the why of the situation. But I think it's more important to say it allows us to explain our view of the why of the situation. It is so broad what we do as a columnist. The perspective and the opinion is the only consistent part of it. Most news has to be objective. This is the part of the news where they pay you to tell people what you think and not to be objective. that is the dividing line between the columnist or the opinion writer or the essayist and the regular journalist. And there are many ways that you can be a columnist. You could be a political columnist. You could be a business columnist. You could be a sports columnist, city, regional, culture, tech, consumer, advice, Dear Abby. Anybody remember Dear Abby? Satire, humor. Clearly, all of these don't require you to go out reporting. Clearly, first of all, advice, almost never. Advice, people send you letters, you figure out which letter you want to answer, one you think you can have the funniest response to, or they're more interesting, they said something crazy, I'm dating his dad and I'm married to him, and what do I do? Stop, that's what you do. So there's a lot of ways to do this job. This is just a handful of the ways that people are columnists, the categories that people consider themselves to be columnists. This is a Metro reporter for the, Metro columnist for the Chicago Tribune. She's going to talk about what it means to be a Metro columnist, but also how writing columns has become much more specialized.
A Metro columnist is a critter that evolved out of newspapers as we have known them. Mike Royko being the classic example of the Metro columnist. The guy, almost always used to be a guy. The guy who lives in the city, the guy who knows the cops and the firefighters and drinks and, gets at the gritty city. Sometimes is funny, sometimes makes you cry, sometimes writes about politics, sometimes writes about, in my case, the centipede in my bathtub. So that model has been around for a while, but as newspapers move online, what I'm sensing is it's very hard to figure out where to put an old-style Metro columnist in a digital publication. So the pressure is even greater than it used to be, I think, for columnists to find their niche. This is not new, but I sense that it's accelerating. So that you need to be either the liberal columnist, the conservative columnist, the parenting columnist, the feminist columnist, the food columnist. I think it's getting harder just in terms of trying to figure out where do you put this on a website, this old-fashioned, I write about everything because we all think about everything column. I really love it all. I mean, I love going out into the city. I love trying to explore, not in a touristy way, but in a really kind of psychological way, what is going on in the neighborhoods, and finding the stories that allow those subtle things to be told. But I also like just writing gosh, it's spring and the leaves are coming back on the trees. If you live in California, you don't know what I'm talking about. But if you live in a cold place, you know that there comes a time every year when that is the only thing that people are really thinking about. They are not thinking about politics. They are looking out their window and going, oh my God, I think that leaf is about to happen.
That is very true about columnists. If any of you aspire to write column in a newspaper, or even now, sounds odd to say newspaper, news organization, because everybody has columns now, and everybody's digital to some degree at this point. But the level of specialization is what is ruling the day. I'm not sure they would have made me a columnist today. Today, we have a lot more lawyers who are being asked to write columns. We have a lot more university professors who are being asked to write columns. What people are looking for now is an area of expertise. When I came along, probably on the tail end of this, it was what she was describing. They looked for smart people who could talk about anything, write about anything. Were they great writers who were good thinkers and clever? That era is passing away. Specialty, specialty, specialty. If you're going to write about medicine, they want you to have been a doctor. If you're going to write about race relations in America, they want you to be a professor of African American studies. That level, it brings a level of credentialing to the writing and expertise, and that is how the terrain is shifting on writing. Even when I came into this space, I was still a specialized person. They called me the visual op-ed columnist. I still produce charts with the columns that I wrote. This is about how the Supreme Court used to be mostly Protestants, and now, this is even increased. I think it is now 6 Catholics out of the 9 justices. And now only 1 Jewish justice. So it is continuing to become a very Catholic court. Whatever that means, it's a fact. So now we come to this question of what is the mission of a columnist? What should you be trying to achieve as a columnist? And we have microphones, right? Yes? That's a question I want to put to anybody here. What do you think, if you have this power, you have this platform, you have this stage, what is the mission here? Any takers? Yes, go. Start conversations. Anybody else?
Oh, okay. To offer not only your view, but insight, and like Kiana said, get people to have conversations about what you believe, but not, like I said, not just your opinion, but your insight about it as well.
Okay. Anybody else? I saw someone over on this side.
Unique, diverse perspectives.
Your mission is to add the diversity. Okay. Anybody else?
I would say to influence people's decisions, since you say now they're looking for people in higher positions, so then you should be able to have an influence on people.
Okay. I want to play you my former colleague, Tom Friedman, and what he says his mission is in writing a column. It agrees with what a couple of you have said, which is an impact.
What I do, opinion writing, is meant to provoke. It's meant to produce a reaction. And that's why I always tell people, I'm either in the heating business or the lighting business. That's what I do. I'm either doing a heating or a lighting. I'm either stoking up an emotion in you, or I'm illuminating something for you. And if I do it right, I will produce one of any number of reactions. You might read my column and say, I didn't know that. That's a good reaction. I produced some light. I never looked at it that way. More light, that's good. I never connected those things. More light, that's good. Your favorite, you live for this as a columnist, happens 4 times a year if you're lucky. You said exactly what I felt, Mr. Friedman, but I didn't know how to say. God bless you. I want to kill you dead, you and all your offspring. I get that. That tells me I produced some heat. Anyways, I explained to you that to produce heat and light required a chemical reaction. and you had to combine 3 chemicals. The first is, what is your value set? What are the principles and ideals you're trying to push into the world as a columnist? Are you a communist, a capitalist, a neocon, a neoliberal, a libertarian, a Keynesian, a Marxist? What are the ideas and principles you're pushing that are the foundation of your opinions? Second, how do you think the machine works? So the machine is my shorthand for what are the biggest forces shaping more things in more places, in more ways, and more days. As a columnist, I'm always carrying around in my head a working hypothesis about how the biggest gears and pulleys of the world work. Why? Because I'm trying to take my values and push the machine in their direction. And if I don't know how it works, I either won't push it or I'll push it in the wrong direction. So I'm always thinking about what are the big gears and pulleys of the world. And lastly, what have you learned about people and culture? Because there's no column without people, and there are no people without culture. How does the machine affect different people and culture, and how do they come back and affect the machine? Stir those 3 together, let it rise, bake for 45 minutes, and if you do it right, you will produce a column for the New York Times that creates heat or light.
So Tom, his focus is what some of you were describing. His focus is audience-centric and reaction-centric. I'm either in the heating business or in the lighting business. His focus is on reader impact. I'm different. I don't follow the Friedman doctrine. I am of the Baldwinian school of essayists, which is that I see my job as to bear witness and to search for truth. This is me describing that.
Part of the writing for me is just an exhaling of what I believe, and I'm trying to be as true in that as humanly possible and not have that, not steer towards trying to get people to click on something, not steer towards trying to win an audience, but simply to express the truth of what I believe. And if that finds an audience, great. If people can use that to help to fuel their fire, great. If it changes someone's mind, great. But that is not the objective for me. The objective for me is that this is the truth of what I feel about the situation in the moment. Sometimes people are shocked when I say I'm not trying to change anybody's mind. I'm not. If it does, great. But I am trying to document what is happening and how I feel about what is happening. And I hope that is helpful, but that cannot be the motivating factor for writing, I don't believe.
No, neither one of these is right or wrong, because there's no certification for being a columnist. But when you start to write, you have to know what your mission as a writer is. It is personal to you. It is between you also and your employer. What do they want from you? But if you have the leeway to define it for yourself, then you must define it for yourself, because that truth of whatever that is will be your guiding light as a writer. For me, it will always be to document and to refract what I am documenting through the lens of me and help the world to understand it. And hopefully, one day, 100 years from now, when somebody's writing a book about this period and they look back, I will have helped to fill in a couple of blanks about what was happening and what this particular person felt about what was happening. Baldwin once put it this way: I have never seen myself as a spokesman. I am a witness. In the church in which I was raised, you were supposed to bear witness to the truth. At another point, he said it this way: the artist is a disturber of the peace. He is produced by the people because the people needed him. They may not like him. They may stone him, like Friedman was saying. They sometimes want to stone you, but they need him. His sole responsibility is to bear witness to and for the people who produced him. I absolutely believe this. I absolutely believe this. When I am writing, I imagine the old people in my hometown, 20 miles west of here. I imagine myself explaining it to them. I imagine the community that produced me over my shoulder, whispering to me, or sometimes even shouting to me what my responsibility is in recording which topics I choose and how I choose to explain them. That is my North Star as a writer. You will have to determine what is your North Star as a writer. One of the things that Tom said that I absolutely agree with is that you have to decide what your value system is. And I think there's a lot of ambiguity because you can afford ambiguity. Because you're just a regular person. You can tweet something today, tweet something that contradicts it tomorrow. Nobody holds your feet to the fire. Let's start with a value subject. This is just, broadly speaking, the subject of abortion. Everybody raise their hand if they are absolutely sure that they either agree that women should have access to abortion or disagree that they should have access to abortion. You absolutely sure about this, raise your hand. Okay, keep them up. If you are absolutely sure that either there should never be late-term abortion or that there absolutely should be late-term abortion, leave them up. If you're not quite sure yet, take them down. We're going to deal with you later. If you're not quite sure, put your hands down. If you are absolutely sure that either there should be an exemption for rape and incest or absolutely sure that there should not be, keep your hand up. But if you're still trying to work through this for yourself, keep your hand down. Don't put it back up. Keep it down. Thank you. We're doing process elimination here. Okay. If you are absolutely sure that viability, meaning if the fetus could live outside the body, if you're absolutely sure that that is the marker for when abortion should not be allowed, if you're sure on that issue, whether you believe like it should be definitely, should not be definitely, leave your hand up. But if you're still working through how you feel about aborting fetuses that could live outside the body, put your hand down. If you have resolved in yourself a heartbeat is either past the time abortion should be allowed or not. Even if there's a heartbeat, you should be able to abort. Keep your hand up. If you're still working that through, put your hand down. If you know that there are some states where 18 weeks is the limit, if you are absolutely sure that that should be the limit, or you're absolutely sure that it should not be the limit, keep your hand up. But if you don't know yet, you're still working that thing through, put your hand down. There are some states now that move down to 6 weeks. If you're absolutely sure 6 weeks is a good idea, or you're absolutely sure that's crazy, keep your hand up. If you're still working through what the 6-week thing means, take your hand down. I can go on and on and on with this. I think I now have 8, 9, less than 10 hands in the air. All the people with your hands down, they were like me. My values weren't fully resolved on many issues because they had never had to be resolved. I could say generally I'm for or against abortion. Nobody's going to test me on that. And I don't have to commit it to writing. The moment that you start committing your belief system, your virtue system to writing, you better be sure you understand it and you have resolved it for yourself, because it will be tested by the people who read the column. And you do not have the flexibility of constantly contradicting yourself or changing your mind. This meant that in the very early days of me being a writer, I did not write about a lot of subjects because I figured I would run into this problem. Like, I'm not exactly sure how I feel about this subject or that subject. And it's not that you should be impervious to change. You should actually be malleable and flexible to change, but change should not be constant, it should be rare. If you find someone who says that they have conviction and they're changing their mind about consequential issues all the time, they don't have convictions. And one thing that the SAS is and what the columnist does is that they are in the conviction business. Please believe what you're writing before you write it. Here's another one of these ethical questions. First of all, can I just say this? I'm not sure do we still have a class called journalism ethics? Do we know? What is it called? There you go. So there are very few classes that I remember from school. I don't know what that's about. Don't ask me. Yeah. But that's one of them. We called it journalism, communication ethics, journalism ethics at the time. I have referred to what I learned in that class my entire career. And also I realized that other people didn't take this class because they didn't have the same ethical standards that I had. And it was all because of this one class here at Grambling. So if it still exists, please, if you're interested, I don't know who's teaching it now, how they're teaching it, but it was one of the most consequential classes I took as a journalist at Grambling. The question is, should columnists write for the reader or for the record? The truth is here, I don't think that it's an either or. I think you end up writing for both. The question is, where do you put the weight? Now it's the digital age. There's a period when I started writing a column, it wasn't as digital. You didn't know who was reading. You know, back in the days before the internet and analytics, the newspaper was one big product, just like a record. You put out your record, you didn't know what people were listening to. You knew what the radio stations played the most, but that's it. You knew what was requested on the radio station the most, but that's it. You don't know how many people listened to the B-side or this track or the 7th track or the 8th track. You had no clue. You had the Billboard charts, and they told you how often something how a single got bought, but that was separate from the larger album or record. So the larger album or record, you just didn't know. Same thing with the newspaper. Nobody knew who was reading what. It was one product. Sold, you bought the whole thing or nothing at all. It wasn't until we got analytics that we realized that nobody was reading the classical music column or the correspondent from Central Africa. We realized that everybody was reading opinion because, as I always put it, people wanted more ammunition than information. They wanted to win the argument when they went to work with their coworker over the coffee. They wanted somebody to chew their food for them. They didn't want to read the 2,000-word story about some business issue. They wanted a columnist to say, this is crazy because this shouldn't be like this, and they stole this money, and this is what should happen. And the columnist had to do that in 850 words, regardless of what the subject was. That's a 3 or 4 minute read, depending on how fast you read. You're in and you're out. So what ended up happening is they realized that opinion sold. Some other things didn't sell as much. Opinion sections grew massively. So the New York Times opinion section is probably 3 or 4 times as big as it was when I joined in 17 years ago or something. Because it made money. People got angry. You know, rage bait is not just happening on Twitter. It's happening in news too. People get angry. And it sells. So I actually know from those analytics who reads my column. They were, and so it's the analytics in newspaper plus the analytics from social. It is 2 to 1 women. I don't know. 2 to 1 women, even though men are much more likely to be subscribed to the New York Times. But my readers were 2 to 1 women. They were women most likely in my age range, 40s, 50s, 60s. They did not keep a race metric. So I don't know what the racial breakdown of those people were. They were overwhelmingly in the Northeast, in and around New York. That's probably, I mean, it is a national newspaper, but it is still a regional city newspaper, so that also made sense. And based on what had done well with those analytics, I could tell the kind of things that would move my readers to read and click and whatever. But the question is that the truth? If I start to chase that, to only write the things that I know that those readers will respond to, by the way, I could do well. It would be on the most read column, read articles on the page. But is that the truth? Occasionally, you have to write the thing you know that nobody will read because it is important that it be read, be written. Some of them, I've only written about HIV in the South 2 or 3 times. Nobody ever reads it. It's a problem for Black people in the South. Increasingly, it is a problem for Black women, and nobody cares. I know nobody's going to read that. But in that case, I am writing for the record so that the New York, somebody looking back in 100 years looks at this and says, this was a pestilence in the southern states among a particular set of people, and did no one write about it? Did no one care that it was happening? These people died from what is now a preventable disease. Nobody has to catch it. Nobody definitely has to die from it. And all of these Black people are continuing to catch it and die from it. Does no one care? In that case, I believe that I was writing for the record, even if my readers did not want to see it. That is an ethical decision that you have to make also as a writer. Particularly now that we have the analytics, particularly if you know what will get the clicks. I know it won't. I know it won't. I know they'll be mad at me. This man, his name is Frank Rich. He was a columnist when I first started. He's no longer at the Times. They had plucked me out of nowhere. I wasn't a writer. People often call the Times a knife fight among valedictorians. Everybody's smart, and they're also kind of vicious. So the idea that I had joined the ranks of the columnists didn't sit well with everybody. And I knew that I was doing some on-the-job training. And I was gonna screw up a little bit because I didn't have the muscle. And every time it happened, or something fell flat, I would be judged harshly. You can't cry about it. Get over that. Just do it better the next time. But Frank was very, very, very nice to me. And he's also one of the most brilliant writers the United States has ever produced, as far as I'm concerned. Just brilliant, beautiful, beautiful writing. He also came of age in this time before specialization. Frank used to be a theater critic. He wasn't a political reporter, any of that. But he was a beautiful writer, wrote amazingly about politics. And so I would go into Frank's office all the time. Hey, and he would just be so kind and patient with me. And I remember going in one time, and the Times had hired a new guest columnist just for like a year or whatever. At this point, I don't care. His name was Bono, the singer. And Frank says, he's never gonna be good at this. And I was like, why would you say that? You don't know, he could be whatever. And he says, he's not gonna be good at it because he wants everybody to like him. And that stuck with me, because you can't do this work if you want everybody to like you, if you want everybody to agree with you, if you only want to write the things that you know the people will nod their heads and say, yes, thank you, Charles, for writing that same thing again. You can't do this work if you are obliged to some political party and they think that because you're a liberal writer, you're also a Democrat, or if you think that because you're a conservative writer, you're also a Republican. You can't do this work, because there will come a moment when there will be somebody in that party who deserves to be written about, and not in the nicest way. And if you are compromised in the sense that you are associated with them to the degree that you cannot write about them credibly because people perceive a conflict of interest, thank you, Grambling ethics class, then you have a problem. This is Frank's advice. You are trying too hard to be liked instead of trying to be honest. Honesty must rule. I like to think of the column this way. Think of the column as writing a book one page at a time. When you read all the pages back, there should be a consistent set of principles apparent in the work. You can think about it as a book. So when I was very young, not very young, when I was in high school, 10th, 11th grade, somewhere in there, I became very, very religious, like floating on the air kind of religious, like praying in class kind of religion. Like I was kind of transforming. I was almost a spirit. I played basketball. I remember like there was a game. When I tell you I pray all the time, we're down by 1 point. We foul this guy. The guy fouls out. I'm on the bench. He puts me in. I'm standing on the sides of the lane, waiting for the guy to shoot the free throw. And instead of paying attention, I'm literally praying. And remove the spirit of competition. I just wanted to save the, all that stuff. And the ball bounces off the rim, literally in front of me. And I'm like, okay. And then everything just kicks in automatic. And I'm like dribbling down it, and the whole crowd's going crazy, and they're chasing me. And I just lay up, and I literally closed my eyes again, and I just said prayer. I was like, it doesn't matter. like, you know, and it went in, and we won. And everybody's like jumping up and down. I'm like, praise the Lord, you know. But I'm like super, super religious. And I remember praying once, I would have these kind of dreams that I consider to be visions, is what it felt like to me. And one evening, the vision was, oh, you're going to become a preacher. And I was like, oh, no, I'm not. That was the first time I said no. And I said, oh, no, I'm not. And at that point, all of the vision stopped. All of the dream. I didn't dream for years. Everything stopped. Just quiet. And I was writing my column, early 2000s, and one night I literally sat up in bed, and I was like, oh my God, I'm a preacher. Because a column is very much like a sermon. It is the same core set of principles. You find a different way into those set of principles based on what's happening in the world every week. The principles don't change. That's pretty much what the sermon is. The biblical text does not change. The preacher finds a different way into that text every week. So yes, he won. All right. So you can think of it as a book, think of them as sermons, whatever way you need to think of it, but the most important word here is consistent. Now, finally down to what is the voice of a writer? What do you think we mean when we say what is the voice of a writer? What is a writer's voice? Anybody?
I think your words. Your words.
Okay. The words themselves are the voice.
Very persuasive.
Persuasion. Form and structure. Anybody else? Oh, here.
I would say the tone, and then sometimes writing has a rhythm to me.
Tone and rhythm.
Oh, the voice of a writer is like the mission and what the writer believes and what it wants its audience to share in, but really the beliefs of the writer. Mm-hmm.
Okay, this gentleman right here was raising his hand. The ideas themselves are the voice. There was, when I became a columnist, someone told me that another columnist had said this. They told me it was Maureen Dowd, but I have never asked her, so I don't want to attribute to her if it's not her. But they said it was her. The columnist should be like an orchestra, each person playing a different instrument, but together we make beautiful music. And this analogy made it clear for me, like that my voice as a writer had to be mine and singular, not somebody else's instrument, but my own instrument. And that I thought about what made me singular, at least in that group. I was the only person who had not gone to a fancy school. There was one columnist who had gone to Hunter College, which is not an Ivy, but most of the others had gone to Ivy League schools. No one else had grown up poor. None of them at that time had grown up in the South or lived in the South. And those were the most important things to me and my voice as a writer that I brought to that job. So I figured if everybody plays a different instrument, I'm going to play the banjo in this orchestra, because is what sounds right for me. Ernest Gaines is one of my favorite writers, Black man from Louisiana. You might know him from Miss Jane Pittman. And this quote of his really spoke to me as a writer. In the beginning, I tried to be a more cosmopolitan writer, but I realized that I was a country boy, and I had to deal with things I knew about and where I came from. And it wasn't until I could relax and stop trying to write like I belonged on the New York Times op-ed page and started to write out of authenticity of who I was and how I sounded and how all the people around me sounded, that it could be true and honest writing and that I could find my voice. James Baldwin, he was trying to finish his first book. He went away to Switzerland. You met this guy. Went away to Switzerland to this guy's cabin on the side of a mountain. You know, Baldwin says, white mountains and white people and white things everywhere. And he says he took one Bessie Smith album and his typewriter. And he said he took Bessie Smith because he was trying to remember what he must have sounded like as a child. And it was in her voice that he could find that. This is the first time, this is a year after I have become a columnist, and I've been faking it and sounding like somebody else the whole time. And this is the first time that it actually felt to me like I was a writer, because I could feel my own voice. These were two 11-year-old boys. This is 2009. One is in Massachusetts, one is in Georgia. They both hanged themselves to death. I think it was, how many days is this apart from each other? This 10 days apart from each other. They did not know each other. They had a common experience. They had both been bullied because the other kids were calling them sissies. And the moment I read about this story, I knew that I knew that life. I knew how they felt. And because I could write about them from a position of knowing, the authenticity was real. I did not have to stretch. I didn't have to sound like anybody else. I just had to describe it from a deep sense of knowing the subject. On April 6th, just before dinner, called Joseph Walker Hoover, a Massachusetts boy who had endured relentless homophobic taunts at school, wrapped an extension cord around his tiny neck and hanged himself. He was only 11 years old. His mother had to cut him down. On April 16, just after school, Jaheim Herrera, a Georgia boy who had also endured relentless homophobic taunts at school, wrapped a fabric belt around his tiny neck and hanged himself as well. He was only 11 years old. His 10-year-old sister found him. Later in that entry, children can't see their budding lives through the long lens of wisdom, the wisdom that benefits from years past, hurdles overcome, strength summons, resilience realized, selves discovered and accepted, hearts broken but mended, and love experienced in the fullest, truest majesty that the words deserve. For them, the weight of ridicule and ostracism can feel crushing and without the possibility of reprieve. And in that dark and lonely place, desperate and confused, they can make horrible decisions that cannot be undone. Well, no more. All people are worthy just the way they are, the way God and nature made them, the way they see themselves through the truest eye of the soul. We must teach every child, okay, so that nay should not be there, because I still wasn't trusting myself to sound like myself. Now that's some King James, Victorian, I don't know who would say nay. I would not say nay, so I don't know why that's. nay, every person, that the greatest measure of our own humanity is the degree of human dignity that we afford to those from whom we are different. A smile, a kind word, a handshake, a hug, understanding and compassion, the simplest acts of goodness can bridge the widest chasms. These little boys deserved our love. Instead, through the vessels of our children, they were shown our scorn. We failed. I knew it because I had attempted a suicide when I was 7 years old. I had the pills in my hand, and I was at a skating rink, and the only thing that stopped me from swallowing those pills is thinking that my mother would be sad. And because I could write with authority about what was happening here, I didn't have to pretend. The writing did not have to be forced. It came easily. And once I realized that the writing could come easily when you knew it and you believed it, and you understood it, then I could just write out of my own voice. So this is what I consider voice, my voice as a writer. The voice is the truest expression of you. The choices that only you would make. Metaphors from your life, pacing and diction specific to you. As a writer, one of the most important things that you have to come to grips with is that you have to stop being ashamed of you. You have to start to value the voice of you and your community as being just as valuable as anyone else's, because only you have lived this life you have lived. You are the absolute expert on that life. Only you would make the references that you would make. And they can literally be tiny things. I remember people questioning Barack Obama's, one of the passages, I think it was in one of his poems, not in the book, but it might have been in the book, but it was, the person was slippery like the seed of a watermelon when you try to pinch it. They said, it doesn't sound like him. Where the watermelons on Maui, anyway, wherever he grew up. But that is kind of specific. And also, it doesn't ask you to be grand. You've pinched a watermelon seed. It is slippery. If you can dig into your life without apology and say, this is the way I would describe it, and I'm not ashamed to use this reference, and my life is valuable, and this is also art. My life is also art. Kind of a radical statement. But unless you believe it, you can't write. Now this is from my first book. Now I'm feeling myself a little bit more. I'm feeling stronger, more confident, the whole thing. But here in this book, I made rules for myself. First of all, that column about the boys, that's when I knew what the book was about. I had been writing little stuff, and once they died and they killed themselves, I was like, oh, that's what my book is about. But I made guardrails. I said, I will not use a single metaphor or word that I would not have known when I was growing up during this period. I will make no references to skyscrapers because I had not seen them. And I will confine myself to describing things. No 50 cents, $5 words, whatever the phrase people use. None of it. Here I am describing my grandmother's fourth husband. She was not a woman who liked to be single. And her fourth husband, she was very much a party woman and, you know, loved to be seen in the big hats and the whole thing. But something about this man had calmed her down. And this fancy woman, I'll wait till you get to the bottom of it. I'll tell you. So this is how, and first of all, he was the most lovely, angelic human being I have ever met in my life. Jed was a chain smoker with a strong back and soft eyes. It was those eyes that struck you, brown, maple syrup sweet, a hint of gray around the edges, sunrise yellow where the white should be, deep enough to get lost in, bottomless like Martin's Pond, damp like the beginning of a good cry, the end of a good laugh. They were the kind of eyes that saw down into the dark of you and drew up the light, the kind that melted worry like a stick of butter near a warm stove, the kind that forgave secret shame before it scarred the throat on the way out. It would take a man with eyes like that to make Big Mama move to the middle of nowhere and bathe outside. The house didn't even have a bathroom. But that became what I knew my voice to be. That all of these references are what a country boy would use. It is a stick of butter near a warm stove, because that's a reference that I would have had. The feeling of being sick, and when every time you cough, it feels like it's scarring your throat. That's a reference that I would have had access to. We lived next to a pond that my mother swore was bottomless, even though there's a tree growing up right up through the middle of it, because her whole life they had told her they didn't want black kids to drown. Black kids used to drown. This is not a thing. It's a real thing. Black kids used to drown all the time. So they didn't want you playing around water. So they would tell you all sorts of things. So they would tell her the pond was bottomless, so they never went near the pond. So the eyes were bottomless like Martin's Pond. Basically, I could have said this in one sentence. He had glaucoma. And his eyes stayed wet because of eye disease. That's a medical way to say that. Much more economical in terms of the amount of words you use. But this makes you see it and also feel who this man is and why he would make my grandmother with the big fancy hats move to the middle of nowhere to live with this man in a place without a bathroom. And I want to leave you with this discussion. This is me on, I think this is a C-SPAN interview, but I'm also talking here about voice and the universality of what it means to be human. And as long as you stay in the richness of your humanity and put that on the page and in your writing, it transcends. It transcends race. It transcends class. How many of you ever read a book or had to read a book? First of all, Shakespeare. You read the Shakespeare. It's just like Jerry Springer with like fancy florid language. Everybody sleeping with everybody, killing everybody. Okay, it's the most ghetto thing you've ever read in your life. But it has the florid language, so we say, oh, this is high art ghetto. This is bougetto or whatever. It's regular ghetto. But that's what it is. But because there's the human thing in it, Hamlet has killed somebody, his wife is like, if you don't stop crying and man up and act like you didn't kill him, we're gonna get in trouble. You're like, that's what's happening. You can bridge all that if you bring the humanity to it. And this is what I'm discussing here.
Maya Angelou has this really great phrase. It says, nothing can be foreign to me because I am human. So I can read a white author's writing and I can connect to it because if they are honest in the writing, then it's human and I can connect. And I fully understand that they are writing about, particularly the period pieces, I don't show up in those books. And yet I can still identify with the emotion of falling in love and losing the love and being hurt and someone dying and the tragedy of that. In the same way, that's what I wrote. I just wrote it about people who I knew. And, Toni Morrison says, when I say people, I mean Black people. She's not saying that in a racist way, like there are no other people in the world. She's only saying that I can only write the people who I know. And so I wrote the people I knew, not trying to make them Black, only to make them human. And that is a very different way of thinking about it. And I think if people come to the piece and think, oh, it's about Black life, it is, but it's about Black life because it's about Black people and they are alive and they are human. And it's about humanity. And that's how we have to think about literature. And if you start to try to write and you say, I am trying to capture Black life in America, I think you're already kind of off on the wrong foot. I think you have to say, I'm trying to capture something real. I think that what ends up happening is that when Black writers write, we kind of impose that on them. We say, because this is your experience and because that person looks like you and because you are relating to them, then this is about Blackness rather than this is a human experience about a shared human experience. And I think that is what you see people writing. I share that oppression. And a lot of times when people share privilege, they don't call it privilege, but they're actually writing from privilege. And we can recognize that. And privilege, part of the privilege is to not ever have to be labeled that I'm writing out of a privileged position. And so, but I can recognize that is what's happening.
And that concludes this part of this class. And now we're gonna move to questions. Anybody with questions, we have 30 minutes. We can do questions for 30 minutes. So anybody have a question, please raise your hand. What, Cherie's saying what? 15 minutes, okay. Cherie just chopped my question and answer in half. So I have 15 minutes of questions.
Hello, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm NSI, I'm a chemistry major. My major doesn't really deal with a lot of writing, but I'm someone who is personally interested in writing. I don't know exactly where I would be in the future, but I love writing. So I want to know, what would be your advice to a college student who envisions to, go into the field of writing? Is it about learning to know your stuff because you mentioned knowing your value system? Or is it more about focusing on developing the skills of writing at the early age? That's my first question. My second question is, how does artificial intelligence impact your field?
So the first one is there are a lot of ways to be a writer. So you can be a technical writer. There is scientific writing for scientific journals, reads nothing like what I've been putting on this screen. And then there is journalism, which is general interest reader kind of writing. So it has to be more accessible. It's a very different tone, uses a different level of language, is not as didactic as scientific writing would be. And then there is the high art of writing, the people of letters, the people who write the fiction that really does well, create a whole world in their head. That's a whole nother thing. So you have to figure out what kind of writing you would be interested in doing, because what would drive each kind of writing is very different. If you're already a scientist and you just want to make sure that when you get around to writing your scientific papers for tenure or whatever, or writing a book for tenure, those things feel very different than what Toni Morrison would be writing. And so you're not following the same rule book when you're considering that writing. When it comes to artificial intelligence, one of the ways that newspapers in general are experimenting with artificial intelligence, and the ways that I also will use AI, is not creation. It is copy editing for grammar. It's just a quick way to do the grammatical copy editing. And if you ask it to suggest the changes rather than make them, it's easy to find where they want to do, so you can agree or not agree with the grammatical change. But it's a kind of soft copy edit. Even with the newspapers, the Times is actually experimenting with the same thing. First pass AI, second pass real human, so that the person has had a chance to look at it, but it just takes, it speeds it up a lot, because if the subject verb just doesn't agree, it just can deal with that issue very quickly, and the human doesn't have to worry about that minor part of it. I think the problem that a lot of people see is creation, because it is derivative by its very nature. It's a bunch of stuff being fed into it. It's feeding off things that humans have already created. It's not creating anything it's not truly creating anything. It's a large language model taking all this stuff and saying, and it can be clever at it. The first time my friend, before I had ever used it, said, you have to try. And I said, okay, fine, what do you want me to do? He says, what are you thinking of writing this week for your column? I told him. He says, this is the prompt. Write a column, this many words, in the voice of Charles Blow about this subject. Because my writing has a voice, there are certain kinds of cadences and rhythms and choices that I would make. It made some of the same choices. So it can replicate me. It's not creating, it's replicating. So that's the danger there.
Hi, my name is Jay Newton. I'm a mass communications senior at the Grambling State University. So I have three internships right now. My last internship with 4 Times in Houston, Texas, where I published 9 articles. And so her as a mentor, she was telling me, like, you almost found your voice, but you're not there yet. So my question to you was, like, how did you know when you officially found your voice, and like, how long did it take you to get there and be confident that this is my voice and I'm writing in it?
So this is going to sound not satisfactory or specific, but it was when I stopped being afraid to sound like me. It is Southern, and I was writing in the New York Times. It does sound like a Southern person, because I literally am envisioning old people that I grew up with. I'm literally thinking, like, how would I explain this to Uncle Pete? Literally. And I will still do the New York Times, the MLK thing. A lot of times, Martin Luther King was preaching to rural Alabama, Mississippi. He knew that nobody was in that audience knew Greek philosophy. But he would vacillate between Socrates and Old Negro spiritual, because he knew he would catch them on the Old Negro spiritual, even if they did not know the Socrates reference. So I would do a little bit of that dance too, the two audiences dance. I'm going to explain this to you, and I believe because it's clever, and these old people I grew up around, these were not slow people. They were very clever. They were beautiful linguists. They did amazing things with the few words they had. Hot as fish grease, that's all that country stuff. Like but it's easy, it makes sense. It's like, oh, yes, it makes sense. So I would do the two things. I would speak to, there were professors reading and highly educated people reading, but also I want to make sure the access is there to the people, my people, who may not have all that, but understand basic metaphors. So one of the columns I wrote, it was after the verdict, responding to the verdict in the Trayvon Martin case, where George Zimmerman was found not guilty. And the column was called "We All Failed Trayvon Martin." And one of the lines in that column became the closing line of the judge's decision to ban New York City's use of stop and frisk. So I was very proud that it had worked. It was a country saying. It was, I made the point that universal suspicion without universal proof is aberrant. You can't say, because I am black and another black person did a thing, that all black people do the thing. And you can't, following that line of reasoning, throw out a wide net, which is doing more harm to innocent people in order to catch the few who are not innocent. And the metaphor I used was that it was like burning down a house to rid it of mice. And that is the line that she used in her opinion. That is a line that I would have used with Uncle Pete. And I could use that vacillating with universal suspicion is aberrant. And pitching and writing on two levels to two different audiences. That became part of what was my voice. And I feel like when you reach the point where you're confident that this is what that this is a metaphor you would have used in your house with your mom. When you're confident committing that to the writing, that becomes who you are. Maybe your references are religious. Maybe your references are hip hop. Maybe your whatever they are. That mix, that gumbo of things, that's what your voice is. And at a certain point, you will start to feel that. It feels natural that only you would have done this way. That's who you are.
Competition for being with national publication companies is so difficult, so competitive. What advice would you have for a person who is writing and would like to get their work out there so that the world could see it? I know that's very, very challenging. What advice would you give?
Well, it's now easier to be published than ever in human history. You can self-publish now. There are millions of books published every single year. And I also tell people that writing is one of man's oldest technologies. And it's hard to do it new and different because there's still, in the English language, the same 26, alphabet, the same number of words. They add a few every year. The dictionary adds a few words, but it's basically the same words I have access to, Shakespeare had access to. Like, it's literally like, so it's hard to like reinvent it, and everybody is taught to write. Every child is taught to write. So we can all do the thing to some level. At least as a singer, like everybody, come on, you can't sing, but like everybody can write something. So I think if you start to think about it in terms of like competition and whatever, that's probably not the right way, because then you're overwhelmed by the fact that it is hard to kind of rise above that. I think thinking about it the other way is probably more useful, that there are more ways to build audience, that you don't have to start at the top with a big job. So anybody can start a Substack where they can write, and people can judge whether or not they like it or don't like it, and if they do, they'll follow, and maybe some of them will pay. Anybody can write on our social media platforms. Some of them allow for longer writing than others, and you know right away whether or not it's connecting with an audience, it finds an audience or not. Sometimes we have to start from the bottom and find an audience for what we're doing, and we can't start at the top. I mean, there are fewer and fewer professional journalism writing jobs. I've been working with MacArthur and Press Forward for the last 2.5 years, and we're losing like 1,000 newspapers, I want to say a year, but it might be more frequent than that. Like, they're dying. So the number of journalism writing jobs keeps shrinking. In their place, there's more social media writing, there's more Substack writing, whatever. So they're more independent journalists. A lot of them are not doing writing work, they're kind of doing talk work, talk to camera. But the idea of finding audience from the bottom up seems to be the best option now than trying to aim for a dwindling number of national, big-time, on-staff writing jobs because they're disappearing. And even the magazines are disappearing. One more question. The Sandman told me that. I didn't say that.
Hey, my name is Ndumi Soshong, and I'm a master's in mass communication student. My question pertains to, you said change should be rare. It shouldn't be often. But how do you maintain that in a world where you are always bombarded with new information that would sort of change your mind on where you stand on particular issues? So how do you maintain that? How do you keep change rare in a fast-moving world like this?
Because I think principles are fundamental. So if the principle that I am holding to is that, let's say, body autonomy, that each human being is sovereign, that they should make choices about their own bodies. If I take that position, there's very little information that could come along that would make me change from that position and go to the other side and say, oh, all of a sudden, your body does not belong to you. It is not autonomous. You do not get to make that choice. That change cannot be happening all the time because of whatever, I don't know what, I'm trying to think of any information that would make me change that position. If I take the position, these are the positions that I have taken, by the way. If I take the position that there is no hierarchy of humanity, that there is no higher order of human and lower order of human, there is no racial hierarchy of human, there is no identification hierarchy of human, there is no religious hierarchy of human. You can't be saying, I'm a Roman Catholic, that makes me better than you as a Muslim. I don't believe any of that. I don't believe in that. I believe that there's a equality among human beings. Every one of us is as valuable as the other, regardless of what our differences are, regardless of racial difference or whatever. There's very little that could come along, new information-wise, I don't know what the new information could be on that point, that would make me change that. So when I'm talking about fundamental differences, fundamental beliefs and consistency, as I was describing on that screen, those are the things that I am consistent about, regardless of what information comes along. You're never going to make me believe that there's a hierarchy of humanity. Nothing can make me believe that. You're also not going to make me believe that each person in this room should not have the last say on what happens to their own bodies. You're never going to make me believe that. So what I'm saying when I say it shouldn't be changing all the time is that these fundamental beliefs, you have to know what they are. And once you know what they are, they're kind of stuck. Maybe there's something that comes along that would make you change it, but it would be very rare for me to figure out something that would come along and make me change one of my fundamental core beliefs. And I think I'm being told that's it. Thank you. Thank you.
Bravo, sir. Bravo, 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 bravo.
Yes.